so good to be doing these reviews back in my home office. I tried doing the Q's mobile reviews because my job had me driving all over the place and I didn't have time to set these things up. So I figured I'd try to knock them out in my car. But that job that had me driving all over the place, I lost that. So that's another story. But I'm able to spend time back here at home. Hopefully, I'll be able to crank these out more often. I'm going to start in my new setup with reviewing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I just got back from seeing this, and you know what? I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a ape fan. I don't know. I am a little older. I grew up on the original Planet of the Apes franchise, and I wasn't a huge fan of those, but I was able to enjoy them. I thought the makeup was great. I thought Roddy McDowell was great. So that's why I went to see the first movie that came out. I don't know what, a decade ago now, I guess. What was it called? I think it was called Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And I was a little disappointed that I wasn't getting my apes that were walking upright with the suits on and all that. It was a little bit more gritty in terms of depicting the apes. They were more ape-like. So I had to get over that. But this film, just like those other movies, for me, it wasn't horrible. But I don't know. It just seems like with all of these films, the story is just kind of lacking. The story is kind of weak. Now, in my opinion, having grown up on the 70s Planet of the Apes franchise, I feel like this film is kind of where the first one, the very first one, should have started off. Let me explain what I mean by that. So, in the original 70s film, Planet of the Apes, they put us directly in the middle of this planet, this universe, where the apes are already evolved, and I don't remember the details, but when we saw that film, we didn't really know. We didn't have any means of questioning why the apes were talking, why they were dressed the way they were. They just set us in the middle of that planet and they said, okay, let's just go. The story was told from the perspective of Charlton Heston, one of the humans, right? So these movies are told as they progress, they're told more and more from the perspective of the apes, which is fine. But in this film, the premise of this film is that it happens, and I'm not spoiling, it happens 300 years after the last film, which was on the Planet of the Apes. And this is just a nitpick, but I just found myself questioning, okay, how did all of the apes learn how to talk? James Franco was experimenting on Caesar with some type of drug. And, I had to do a Wikipedia search, but that drug is what caused the virus that killed a lot of mankind. And it made those who did not die, it made them mute. But it also gave the apes the power to speak. And I'm just trying to say, I'm trying to figure out, how did all of the apes that we see in this film learn how to speak? Because they all weren't experimented on, unless the drug that James Franco developed infected their DNA, and then as they multiplied, I don't know. Someone can straighten me out on that. At any rate, that was a difficult thing. I tried to take myself out of that, but I kept finding myself asking, boy, there's something I feel like that's missing from the last film to this film that kind of gives me something to hang my hat on about how these apes are now so much more advanced and how they're speaking. There's one ape in the film. I liked this character. His name was Raka, and he was cool. But he spoke like Shakespeare. I'm like, it's one thing that they have rudimentary speech, but there's another ape that uses words like proclivities or something like that. I'm like, now that's nitpicking. But I had a lot more problems with this movie. First of all, I didn't really understand a lot of it because the apes at the beginning of the film, it's Noah, who is now the lead ape in terms of he's the lead character. Not necessarily the lead ape, but the lead character, and his friends whose names I can't remember. Sanaya, can't remember their names. Sanaya and Anaya or Suna, something like that. They talk so broken English, such broken English at the beginning of the movie, that I really had a hard time understanding them. And that was the part of the movie, that first act, which sets everything up. So I was kind of lost. I was able to pick up and just assume things in context. But I got kind of lost at the beginning of this movie. As the movie progresses, they introduce, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything here, they introduce an intelligent human. Her name is May. And I'm not going to say much more about that because she plays a lot into the story. Um, she's kind of she's full of tricks, and she's not what we are led to believe. And I won't say anything more than that. But I would just say that a lot of things that she was able to do, and a lot of things that happened during the course of this film, I didn't buy into it completely. And the story was so, I don't want to say weak, it was so thin that I never really bought into it. I mean, basically, the story is about an ape named Proximus who, and I'm being very generic here, who basically just wants to take over the world. It's the most generic villain trope that they could possibly have come up with for this character. I just couldn't help feeling that, okay, now we've gotten apes who are talking. All of the apes are talking now. And I just feel like with that leap from the last film to this film, they really should have came with a much stronger story. I just felt like the story wasn't that dynamic. And I've walked away from each of these movies feeling that same way. There wasn't really anything grand or epic about them. It was pretty much just like apes versus humans or good versus evil, which is a theme in just about every story. But I mean, to not find a better way to implement that in this movie, that I think there was a huge gap between War of the Planet of the Apes and this film. I just think they could have come up with a better reason to bring this back to the screen and advance it 300 years. That's a bold step. But they didn't really, I don't feel like they really did anything with it. It would have been nice to maybe see, this is me nitpicking, maybe see a couple of flashbacks to get to the point where how they advanced so far from the last film. I know it's 300 years, but still, the apes are talking now. I needed more to make me feel invested in the story. Now, at the end of this movie, there is I'm not going to call it a twist, and I'm not going to give anything away, but it just seemed just totally implausible to me. And here's another problem I've had with all of these movies, this one included. It seems like these movies, and I guess you could say the same thing about the MCU and the DCEU prior to James Gunn taking that over. The whole industry seems to be about making films, franchise films, that don't have a satisfactory plot in the film I'm watching. But their point is to make me feel like, so the next one, we're going to find out the real deal. And that takes place at the end of this movie as well. Something happens where they don't give us any real definitive answer. And I know I get accused of wanting answers, definitive answers, all the time. And that's not true. But I need to have some understanding, or why did you do that? I mean, don't just leave it open like that. There has to still be a good reason for it. And after seeing everything that happens in this film, to see that last part, the very last part, I'm like, okay, well, that's the story that I want to see. Not this stuff that you did with Proximus and, Noah, and a character that I really don't know why we should care about other than he's just the lead character. And I guess my son made a good point. I took my little brother and my son to see this, and my son said, why do I care? Why should I care about Noah? Who is Noah? And I had to think, he's got a good point. If the main character had been the antecedent or progeny of Caesar, then that already gives that character some type of weight, some type of investment from me, because I've seen Caesar in the previous 3 films. This character, I mean, this is another nitpick, but this character is not established in any film. It's like, why him? Why Noah? Why this character? What makes him special? Like I said, it wasn't a horrible film. I'll give it 3 out of 5 reels. And the reason I'm giving it 3 reels, despite not having much positive to say about it, while I didn't have anything positive to say about the film itself, the technology in making the film, that was amazing. The acting was all on point. The voice acting was all on point. I don't know if this was a motion capture film, mocap or not, or if it's all just CGI. The apes and the chimps and the orangutan were all created CGI, but the expressions on on the characters just amazing. And they do have a lot of human expressions, which kind of took me a little bit out of this. Like humans in this movie are like they're feral, they're wild for the most part. So where would they have gotten these human emotions and expressions? But I can let that go. But yeah, technically amazing. The fur on these apes, I, fantastic. The cinematography was great, wonderful. It was amazing to look at. I just wish that the story could have supported that a little bit more. Hey, I'm back. And the reason I'm doing this is because as I was editing this video yesterday, a full 24 hours ago, and a haircut and a wardrobe change ago, as I was going through the footage, I realized that I didn't explain one element very well, or one of my opinions very well. And also, you know, I bought a couple of new cameras, so now this gives me a chance to experiment with the different cameras that I got. So I'm trying to see if I like this one better or the one I used before. I was saying how I had a problem with the fact that, not a problem, but it just kind of took me out of it that all the apes are able to talk in this film. And one might say, well, Mike, you know, you said that when you saw the 70s version, the original 70s version, Planet of the Apes, the very first film, all the apes were talking in that movie, and it didn't bother you at all that they could talk in that film. So why are you complaining about them being able to talk in this movie? Well, the reason I was trying to explain, not very successfully, is that when I went to see the Planet of the Apes original film, I did not see it in theaters. I was only 2 years old, I think. But when I saw it for the first time, you know, I had no preconceived notions. I had no expectations because the first film put us right into the fancy word coming up, mise en scène of the film. That means we were put right in the middle of everything. We saw everything through Charlton Heston's eyes. So the fact that I see apes that are talking right off the bat, I have nothing to compare that to. So I'm like, I can accept it because, well, this is the first time I'm seeing this, and this film is establishing that there is a planet that has talking apes. Okay? So it's like when I first saw Star Wars, I had to accept that there was this big menacing person in a dark black helmet and dark black machine-looking costume named Darth Vader. It was there, so I had to accept it. I was able to accept it. The difference with this new franchise, and you notice I haven't even brought up Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes. We're going to leave that alone. But in this new franchise, the very first film in the new franchise, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, they go back into an origin story and but they set up a whole world and they give us reasoning behind everything. Well, there was an experiment, a new drug, a virus that broke out because of it. So now, if you're going to go back like that and try to give me all of the progression, well, it makes it more difficult for me to just accept that these apes can talk, because now I'm going to want to break down, well, what happened that they were able to talk even if it took 300 years. So going back to my Star Wars analogy, so when I went to see Star Wars for the first time, and I am old enough to have seen that movie in the theaters actually, I didn't question in this science fiction fantasy film the existence of a big dude in a robot uniform, Darth Vader, because it just existed and it was a science fiction fantasy film. I accepted it. But when they started going back in time, when they put out those prequels, Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and they try to explain everything, well, if you're going to do that, then you're going to make me question Darth Vader's existence, because you're going to put stuff in there that I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. I didn't envision it that way. Midichlorians, anyone? No, it doesn't make sense then. Same thing with these movies here. The original Planet of the Apes, I had nothing to gauge it by. They could throw anything at me because it was science fiction, and I bought it. These new crop of films, they start off trying to explain everything. And so now I'm like, well, now that I've seen the past, it's hard to believe or hard to accept, at least for me, that every ape can talk now. And now the other thing is, well, Mike, like you said in the earlier in this video, well, there was a virus that caused the humans to go mute and for the apes to be able to talk. Okay, I have to accept that, I guess. And it's just because it doesn't make any sense that the virus is so multifaceted that that it can make the humans mute but the apes talk. I don't think that's how viruses work. It's just a little implausible. But okay, I can let that go. I forgot that that was part of the plot point. That was a plot point in the very first new trilogy or new franchise film, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So yeah, that's why they're able to talk. Does that make it any harder for me to suspend disbelief? Absolutely not. But they at least explained it. So all right, I'll let them have that. And that's the martini. Go check it out for yourself. Let me know what you think as always. I'll see you next time.